to Paris, London, and eventually to the Americas. The English language first recorded the word vampire in 1732, the same year George Washington was born. As the legend traveled from east to west, key elements of the vampire transformed. The figure shifted from a ghostly presence to a risen corporeal corpse that needed to drink blood. This transformation occurred in the 18th century and added a pseudo-scientific layer to the myth. At this time, Westerners, moving away from superstition, began to see vampirism more as a disease than a supernatural curse. It's notable that instead of dismissing these stories outright, the intellectuals of the era tried to rationalize vampirism using scientific ideas. During the 1700s, blood was commonly believed to have medicinal properties and was used to treat various ailments, from epilepsy to poor vision. This practice, known as medicinal cannibalism, was based on the belief that blood was the vessel of the human soul, making it a powerful substance for healing. This context made the vampire's need to consume blood seem more plausible and medically informed. Thus, the Western vampire became a figure that consumed blood not merely for sustenance, but as a form of restoring life, aligning more closely with the scientifically curious society of the time. This evolution of the vampire from a spectral ghost monster to a blood-drinking, scientifically analyzed creature set the stage for the iconic Dracula character introduced in 1897. As the 19th century progressed, the vampire transformed from folklore to a prominent figure in literature and popular culture. The publication of Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897 marked a significant turning point. Stoker's Count Dracula was a fusion of historical myth and contemporary societal fears, embodying the anxieties of Victorian England about sexuality, invasion, and the unknown. This novel not only popularized the vampire myth across Europe and America, but also established many elements now considered classic vampire traits, such as vulnerability to sunlight and garlic, the need for an invitation to enter homes, and the ability to transform into a bat. Dracula has been covered as a separate and dedicated video on this channel. For more on the character and his influences, feel free to watch the video. Moving on. In the early 20th century, the vampire began to make its mark on the film industry, initially through silent films. The 1922 film Nosferatu, directed by F.W. Murnau, was unofficially based on Stoker's Dracula, introduced the vampire to a global audience, albeit with a more grotesque and monstrous depiction than Stoker's charismatic Count. This portrayal emphasized themes of contagion and corruption, resonating with the post-World War I fears of decay and disease. Universal Pictures significantly shaped the vampire genre with its series of films, starting in the 1930s. The journey began with Dracula, 1931, starring Bela Lugosi in his iconic portrayal of the titular vampire. This film set the tone for vampire characteristics in cinema, elegant, sinister, and with a hypnotic Eastern European accent. Universal capitalized on this image, creating a series of films that expanded the lore around vampires and included crossovers with other monsters, contributing to the creation of a shared cinematic universe. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Universal continued to delve into the supernatural with sequels and related movies, such as Dracula's Daughter, 1936, and Son of Dracula, 1943, with the latter featuring Lon Chaney Jr. These films explored different aspects of vampirism, like the curse of immortality and the tragic fates of those who become vampires. These narratives deepened the horror elements associated with vampirism, blending them with themes of doom and familial tragedy. A significant highlight in Universal's monster mashups was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, 1948, which, although primarily a comedy, played a crucial role in vampire cinema. This film not only brought back Bela Lugosi as Dracula, but also featured Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman and Glenn Strange as Frankenstein's monster. It marked a unique intersection of horror and comedy, providing a lighter yet respectful take on the horror icons established by Universal. This movie showcased the versatility of the vampire genre, demonstrating its adaptability and enduring appeal in popular culture. The mid-20th century saw the vampire adapt to the changing landscapes of horror and fantasy in literature and cinema. In 1958, Hammer Film Productions reignited the vampire genre with Dracula, starring Christopher Lee, who became the new face of the vampire, more violent and overtly sexual than his literary counterpart. This era expanded the vampire's role as a symbol of rebellion and social nonconformity, which resonated with the burgeoning counterculture movements. By the latter part of the 20th century, vampires had fully entrenched themselves in popular culture, but began to diverge into two main paths. One path adhered to the terrifying image of the predatory night creature, while another took a more sympathetic view, portraying vampires as complex characters struggling with moral and existential dilemmas. This duality can be seen in Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, 1976, which offered a gothic and introspective look at vampires, emphasizing their loneliness and eternal outsider status. Rice's vampires are introspective, conflicted, and profoundly human in their desires and regrets, a stark contrast to the purely evil entities seen in earlier portrayals. 15 novels were written within the Vampire Chronicles universe. The Salem's Lot mini-series in 1979 became an early success in the popular subgenre, along with Kolchak the Night Stalker 1972. Both of these entries are still lauded and influential to this very day. The 1980s were a transformative decade for the portrayal of vampires in cinema, offering a fresh, innovative take that often mixed horror with other genres like comedy and action, capturing the eclectic style of the era. Films like Fright Night and The Lost Boys, 1987, became iconic for its portrayal of vampires. The Lost Boys for portraying vampires as rebellious, punk rock-influenced youths in California, providing a stark contrast to the traditional Gothic vampire. This movie, known for its blend of horror and humor, along with the youthful energy and a killer soundtrack, helped redefine the vampire myth for a new generation. Near Dark, 1987, took a grittier approach, combining the vampire theme with elements of a Western film. Directed by Catherine Bigelow, this film focused on a nomadic band of vampires, showcasing a blend of outlaws and the undead, devoid of the typical romanticization of vampires, emphasizing instead their brutal nature. Similarly, Vamp, 1986, offered a horror comedy experience set in a strip club that serves as a front for a vampire brood, blending the macabre with slapstick humor in a unique nocturnal setting. Another significant film, The Hunger, 1983, starred David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve and presented a stylish and erotic take on the vampire myth, combining gothic horror with contemporary visual style. Life Force, 1985, directed by Tobe Hooper, expanded the vampire concept to a sci-fi context, featuring space vampires that come to Earth, which introduced a new dimension to the traditional vampire narrative by incorporating elements of science fiction and a global apocalypse. Throughout the 80s and the 1990s, the vampire genre diversified even further, exploring new stories as well as adaptations and mediums that appealed to broader audiences. The 90s saw influential films that continued to shape the vampire legend. Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, was a significant adaptation that returned to the Gothic roots of the vampire legend with lavish production and a focus on the romantic and horror elements of the classic tale. Another notable film preceded it with Innocent Blood, 1992, directed by John Landis, blended horror and crime with elements of black comedy, telling the story of a vampire in Pittsburgh who preys on the mafia. 1994 was significant due to the arrival of the long-delayed adaptation of Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, written by the author and retaining the majority of the book's plot and themes, with some departures. Television also played a crucial role in reshaping the vampire mythos. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 1997 to 2003, created by Joss Whedon, based on what was considered to be a failed film, which returned to the original screenplay, combining horror, comedy, and drama while following a young woman battling against vampires and other supernatural threats. Buffy's mix of action, witty dialogue, and character-driven storytelling won a dedicated following and left a lasting impact on the genre and beyond with an exceptional spin-off show called Angel. Additionally, The Southern Vampire Mysteries by Charlaine Harris, first published in 2001, offered a lighter, more humorous take on vampire lore, eventually adapted into the successful TV series True Blood in 2008. Comics. Comics and graphic novels also embrace the vampire, often blending horror with fantasy and superhero elements. Notable examples include Blade, a Marvel Comics character who is a vampire hunter, which further transitioned into a successful film series starting in 1998. Another significant entry is 30 Days of Night, 2002, which introduced a new concept where vampires take advantage of the polar night in an Alaskan town to feast uninterrupted for a month. American Vampire is a groundbreaking comic series created by Scott Snyder and Rafael Albuquerque with its unique take on the vampire mythology. Launched in 2010 and featuring distinct eras of American history, the series introduces a new breed of vampire, the American vampire, which is more vicious and evolves differently than its old world counterparts. The comic series was enriched by Stephen King's contribution to the early volumes, adding depth and horror to this innovative saga. Games like Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines, 2004, offered a deep role-playing experience, allowing players to engage in a complex world governed by vampire politics and ethics. As the millennium turned, vampires became ubiquitous in popular media, appearing in a wide range of books, films, and television shows. The genre blended with romance, mystery, and young adult fiction, exemplified by Stephenie Meyer's Twilight series, which portrayed vampires in a predominantly romantic light. Elemental manipulation. Control over elements such as fire, water. In combat. Immunity to mind control, resisting attempts at mental manipulation or domination by other vampires or supernatural beings. Soul manipulation, draining or manipulating the essence of a person's soul, leading to control or destruction. Hive mind, sharing thoughts, emotions, or experiences with other vampires within a certain radius, creating a collective consciousness. Emotion absorption, absorbing and feeding off of the emotions of others, gaining strength or sustenance from them. Illness immunity, immunity to diseases, viruses, and infections due to their supernatural nature. Teleportation gates, creating portals or gateways for instantaneous travel between locations. Energy constructs, forming solid constructs out of pure energy, such as weapons or shields. Temporal stasis, temporal individuals in time, rendering them immobile. Molecular manipulation, manipulating the molecular structure of objects or living beings at will. Inherent knowledge, inheriting knowledge or skills from previous generations of vampires within their bloodline. Psychic resilience, resistance to psychic attacks, including mental intrusion or illusions. Curse infliction, placing curses or hexes upon individuals or locations, bringing misfortune or suffering. Biomass absorption, absorbing organic matter for sustenance or regeneration, including plants and animals. Ethereal communication, communicating with spirits or entities from other realms through telepathy or mediumship. Reality warping, altering reality itself within a limited area or scope of influence. Molecular phasing, passing through solid objects or barriers by shifting their molecular structure. Subjugation aura, emitting an aura of dominance or intimidation, compelling others to submit or obey. Temporal perception, manipulating their perception of time, allowing for heightened awareness or slowing down of time in combat. Exoskeleton generation, manifesting a protective exoskeleton or armor made from their own blood or energy. Necromancy, raising and controlling the dead, either as mindless minions or as sentient servants. Energy vampirism, draining energy from sources other than blood, such as electricity or life force. Dimensional sealing, sealing or locking away entities or objects within alternate dimensions or pocket realities. Existential absorption, absorbing the essence or existence of other beings, erasing them from existence entirely. Weaknesses commonly associated with vampires. Sunlight. Exposure to sunlight can weaken or harm vampires, potentially causing burns or disintegration. Wooden stake, being pierced through the heart with a wooden stake, can immobilize or kill a vampire. Fire. Vampires are often vulnerable to fire, which can cause severe damage or destruction. Decapitation. Severing a vampire's head from its body is often fatal. Holy symbols. Holy symbols such as crosses or religious artifacts can repel or harm vampires due to their supernatural nature. Holy water. Contact with holy water can burn or injure vampires. Garlic. Garlic is believed to repel vampires and weaken their powers. Running water. Vampires may be unable to cross running water, such as rivers or streams, depending on the lore. Silver. Silver weapons or objects can harm or injure vampires, similar to werewolves. Reflections. In some legends, vampires lack reflections in mirrors or other reflective surfaces. Invitation. Vampires may be unable to enter a home or dwelling without an invitation from the owner. Crossroads. Some folklore suggests that vampires cannot pass over a crossroads or intersection without assistance. Sleeping in soil. Some vampires must sleep in the soil of their homeland or place of origin to rest peacefully. Religious grounds. Vampires may be repelled by consecrated or holy ground, such as churches or cemeteries. Vervain. In some interpretations, vervain is toxic to vampires and can weaken or incapacitate them. Silver chains. Binding a vampire with silver chains can restrict their movement or abilities. Coffin rest. Vampires may be vulnerable while resting in their coffins during the day. Blood starvation. which can distract or immobilize vampires if they become fixated on the counting process. Poppy seeds, sensitivity or allergic reactions to poppy seeds, which may induce lethargy, drowsiness, or disorientation in vampires due to their association with sleep and dreams. Several documentaries on this channel have explored this topic, and more is on the way. If you enjoyed this video, then like and subscribe. I'll catch you in the next video.